It's official. Beau Bartlett announced that he is going to be back and wrestle for Penn State in the 2024-25 season. Now, two more decisions left to be made. What are Greg Kerkvliet and Carter Starocci going to do?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One big decision down, two more to go for Penn State wrestling as Carter Starocci and Greg Kerkvliet still have to decide the next year of their futures. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Let me know down in the comments. Beau Bartlett coming back, his impact, Carter Starocci, Greg Kerkvliet, what you think their decisions will be and when, in fact, they will make them. Like this episode, help out the channel, help this show get in front of more Penn State wrestling fans so we can have bigger and better conversations about the sport. So we're going to talk about Carter Starocci and Greg Kerkvliet, Beau Bartlett's impact, and then finish up with a Penn State football recruiting update, as well as men's basketball in the final segment of this show. In regards to Carter Starocci and Greg Kerkvliet, yes, Beau Bartlett coming back. That's huge news, right? Veteran in the mat room once again. Runner-up at 141. So you have that anchored. That 141 spot is anchored. And Beau Bartlett is just such a glue guy, right? Very likable, always positive, incredible personality just from seeing that on display in interviews and just watching Beau Bartlett and speaking with him, right? Carter Starocci and Greg Kerkvliet are guys that I wouldn't say that Beau Bartlett was the most obvious wrestler to come back. I mean, he didn't walk at senior day. Greg and Carter did. So now the ball is in their court as far as what they want to do. Starocci's decision is interesting. And I've said this, I will continue to reiterate it here. Starocci does not want to do school anymore. He's made that very clear. I don't have to assume for him. He's tired of being a student at Penn State. He wants to move on with his career, whether that's MMA, whether that's international. He's participating at the Olympic trials, right? But he has a big decision if he wants to come back and what that would look like. I don't think he does. I don't think he comes back because he doesn't prove anything by getting that fifth NCAA title. Sure, he absolutely stands alone, but this is going to take a lot of convincing from Penn State and particularly Cael Sanderson. Don't forget, Alex Facundo is going to return. I have him as my pick to take over the 174-pound slot. If Carter Starocci is going to come back, that's going to alienate somebody out of the lineup. Because what this is going to look like, and Jeff Byers has said this, is that Carter Starocci would not wrestle a full season if he were to come back. He would wrestle essentially a partial season because this has been done before. Wrestle enough matches, you train and do everything else you want with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, or maybe that's MMA, right? But he's probably more of the international circuit, right? Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But he would train for the international circuit and then wrestle for Penn State selectively through the regular season. Big dual meets, Iowa, Ohio State. You get my point. Michigan, right? Michigan's landing a lot of wrestlers in the transfer portal. And then he would wrestle enough to qualify for the postseason, and then he would obviously win a fifth NCAA title. And that's the other part of it too. Who in that 174-pound bracket could challenge Carter Starocci? Gabe Arnold? Don't do that. It's not. Gabe Arnold, as talented as he is not on the same level as Carter Starocci and probably never will be. Might get close, but I don't think he is ever going to beat Carter if they ever, in fact, do match up in this case. But there's nobody else. Keegan O'Toole is rumored to move up to 174. And if he does, I still think Carter beats him. So what does Carter have left to prove by coming back for one final season at Penn State? Really, nothing. Nothing. He would win the fifth NCAA title. There's nobody that's going to challenge him. And then there's that part of it of he's just tired of school. So if Penn State can work something out where his class load is very limited, he's able to, work his way towards another degree, his master's. I imagine he's going, if he walked at senior day, he's probably going to walk and officially graduate after the spring semester here. I don't think Carter Starocci comes back. And you alienate someone in the starting lineup if you do that. Have somebody wrestle part-time. If he's wrestling part-time and then taking over in the postseason, that's an interesting dynamic that Cael Sanderson and the coaching staff are going to have to figure out. Greg Kerkvliet makes a little more sense here. Because Penn State doesn't have an option at heavyweight. You look at the roster, you look at who's coming in. Penn State's going to need time to develop. So someone like a Cole Mirasola, one of the Mirasola twins, will most likely end up at heavyweight. But with where he's been wrestling over the course of his high school career, he's going to have to move up that weight. Sure, he can sacrifice some weight, but he's not ready as a true freshman to take that heavyweight spot. Penn State could go into the transfer portal. That's an option there. So if Greg Kerkvliet decides not to come back, Penn State will definitely be in the transfer portal looking for a heavyweight, maybe for one, possibly a 2-year plan in that spot. They honestly might go to the transfer portal regardless because Kerkvliet only comes back for one more season. It makes sense for Kerkvliet to come back because there is a mutual need here for Penn State. Greg Kerkvliet might be in the same boat as Starocci. What does he have left to prove? He worked his way up, got to the mountaintop, and won that heavyweight title. You can be a back-to-back champion. I mean, Mason Parris waited a long time. We saw Gable Steveson dominate this weight class. So maybe Kerkvliet really wants to keep that hold of the heavyweight crown. I mean, he signed an NIL deal, a part of the WWE, right? So Greg Kerkvliet has some interesting things that he can do with his future. I think it makes a lot of sense here for him to come back because Penn State needs heavy. I mean, the only other option is AJ Friccione. He was listed at 197 heavyweight. It's going to be difficult to see how Penn State approaches that if Kerkvliet does not, in fact, come back. But it's not like Kerkvliet has been a 3-4-time champion. Another gold medal at that spot at the end of a wrestling season would be nice for the hardware case in Kerkvliet's position. Now, when will Starocci and Kerkvliet make these decisions? Bartlett made this decision rather quickly, in my opinion. Now, all three of them are set to wrestle at the Olympic trials. Given Carter Starocci's run at the NCAA tournament and the leg injury, no matter the specifics, right? I think Kerkvliet and Starocci are going to save their decisions for after the Olympic trials. Both of them are going to wrestle them, the qualified, right, by winning their respective weight classes and everything. But I think those decisions, and they might come sooner, but if you want my opinion, I think they will wait until after the Olympic trials to say, okay, let me refocus because right now, and I'm not saying Beau Bartlett isn't focused because he's going to wrestle since he placed at the senior national competition. He is also wrestling in the Olympic trials here at his respective weight class. Beau Bartlett, I think, was just asked about it, knew what he wanted to do. And again, he's out for revenge. For Kerkvliet, Starocci, they're focused on the Olympic trials themselves. And then I think they will come to that conclusion. Now, what is Beau Bartlett's impact? The comment section provided some interesting feedback and some ideas about what's going to happen with the starting lineup regarding 141, 149, since Tyler Casack could potentially redshirt here. Bartlett's decision, how does that impact the starting lineup? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is the best place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150. That's right, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots in hockey to home runs to slam dunks, all on the app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Now, what are you waiting for? All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, let me know what you think about Beau Bartlett's decision to actually come back. His impact here, glue guy. I fully believe that he is a glue guy, a leader in the Penn State mat room, a veteran, and whether it depth, everything else, it just creates so much. I mean, you had an NCAA runner-up. I find this interesting that, there's some people want Tyler Casack to potentially move down to 141. And there was an interesting idea here. A wrestle-off between Tyler Casack and Beau Bartlett, because the plan at the beginning was to have Casack redshirt and wrestle at 141 and then be ready to go. But then circumstances change. Shane Van Ness gets injured, right? Who knows if he's going to be 100%? Maybe Casack does wrestle. What Bartlett does by coming back is you have your starter, the guy who's and I'm not saying that Casack would be, and that's the thing. So to think about that, right? I think that's something. Bartlett and Casack in a wrestle off, who would win? I would think Bartlett would. I mean, Casack has shown so much potential, but I would still think that Bartlett, being a veteran of the sport, longevity here, Casack certainly had a run, but I still think that's a Beau Bartlett's weight class. Okay. And now that's it creates an interesting dynamic again. What do you do with Casack? Do you redshirt him? Do you have him ready to go at 149? Do you wrestle, right? Some people are talking about him cutting weight and having him wrestle at 141 moving forward and having that be the future plan once Beau Bartlett does, in fact, leave. But at the end of the day, it creates depth. I'm not trying to jinx anything, I promise. Knock on wood. But we saw what happened with circumstances, just how important it is. Someone who finished third, and Penn State has the luxury of potentially redshirting Tyler Casack, who just finished third at the NCAA tournament, right? But if it wasn't for Casack being in the mat room, you don't have that flexibility to have someone ready to compete, ready to go at that high of a level when Shane Van Ness goes down. So Beau Bartlett just adds pure talent. Somebody who was so close, was possibly a move, another scramble away from winning a gold medal. And we'll see. Jesse Mendez is going to be back, right? 141 gets very intriguing from that point of view of and I've said it, Mendez and Bartlett are very close to one another in terms of pure talent. Talent alone, like the talent gap between the two was the closest out of all of the weight classes. At least that's what it seemed to me. So Bartlett gets his opportunity for revenge. Will probably continue to look towards a plan to compete internationally and so on. And he can still do that all while wrestling collegiately for one final season. But it does create a logjam, right? But the idea that, Beau Bartlett should move on because Tyler Casack is ready to go and Shane Van Ness is all healthy, I think is ludicrous to think. I do. Beau Bartlett would not come back if this wasn't his starting spot, right? If this was going to be threatened. It's not going to be threatened. If there does happen to be a wrestle off to see if Casack challenges him or to see where the gap is between the two of them in Penn State's own mat room, Beau Bartlett does not come back if he is not the 141-pound starter. So the impact is huge, to say the least. Bartlett comes back. Let's see how that affects Starocci and Kerkvliet. I'm confident in Kerkvliet. Starocci, we'll see what Penn State and Cael Sanderson are able to do to convince Starocci to come back for a fifth NCAA title. Now, a brief Penn State football recruiting update. Are they going to miss out on another priority commitment? Penn State men's basketball is not going to do what UConn just did in back-to-back years. We'll discuss that on the other side of this break. Is Penn State set to miss out on another priority recruit in the class of 2025? Before we get to that, remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And in this final segment, we'll talk about Trent Wilson, the prospect who is set to commit in a matter of 24 hours here, depending on when you're watching or listening to this episode. His commitment comes April 10th on Wednesday here. This episode going up on Tuesday. And Penn State men's basketball is not going to do the thing that UConn just did, let alone once, but obviously twice here in back-to-back years. So that's how we'll wrap up this episode. In regards to Trent Wilson, four-star prospect, and that's not just any old four-star. This is a top 150, I should say, 150 consensus player in the nation, top 15 defensive lineman, top 3 prospect in the state of Maryland. On 3 has him ranked as the number 1 prospect coming out of the state of Maryland. And Penn State is going to miss out on a commitment from Trent Wilson. Like Matt Zollers, this was a priority recruit, and this one stings. I consider, Pennsylvania the best in PA, stay in PA. I get all of that, but Penn State and James Franklin have had so much success recruiting the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the DMV, Maryland in this case. And Trent Wilson, someone who visited Penn State frequently, high up on their recruiting board for this cycle, and they're not going to get him. So what happened and what are the signs that are pointing to this? Well, Trent Wilson had an official visit scheduled with Penn State on April 13th. That's the day of the blue and white game, the spring game, to finish up spring practices. And okay, that's good. Get to see a preview of the festivities on game day, right? And Penn State's opportunity to be a closer on the recruiting trail in this case. But then Trent Wilson makes the decision that he's going to announce his verbal commitment on Wednesday, April 10th. Oh, that's interesting. That is not good news for Penn State. That is certain. That is terrible news for Penn State in this case. Wilson's top four were Maryland, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Penn State. And after he went out to Oklahoma, and then he just made a stop in Columbus, decided, you know what? I'm all wrapped up with my recruiting visit. This is the modern age of high school football recruiting at the college level. I will let people make their own conclusions here, because their own conclusions in this point, because he only went to Oklahoma on one official visit, visited Penn State pretty frequently. I mean, locality has everything to do with it, but he makes one visit out into the Midwest and then comes home and he's like, you know what? I'm ready to make my commitment. And it's going to be Oklahoma. Every recruiting site points to Oklahoma. I'm 99.99% sure that it's going to be the Sooners, and Penn State misses out on another premier prospect in the class of 2025. Brian Smith, the Locked On Podcast recruiting expert, is going to be back on the show to discuss just that and more. You know, is there a concern at this point for Penn State because they've lost Matt Zollers, who was in state, but then you have no defensive linemen in the class of 2025, and you don't get Trent Wilson? At least all the signs point that way. And on Wednesday, April 10th, we will find out officially if he will commit to Penn State, most likely Oklahoma in this case, or maybe Ohio State comes from behind in this case, kind of like the Georgia-Missouri situation with Zollers, with Missouri coming from behind. And then Penn State men's basketball. I like Mike Rhodes. I like him a lot. I think he's doing great things for the program. But man, what a feeling it must be to be a Connecticut Husky fan. Now, I know they don't have anything of a football program. I get that. But basketball, that is a powerhouse like anything. The dominant stretch, and we talk about Penn State wrestling setting the points margin record. Look at UConn over the past two seasons. They're beating the best of the best in one singular tournament by 10, 15, 20 plus points on their way cruising to victory. Purdue had no answer. And what a feeling that must be. I know Penn State's a football school. I totally get that. But I'm going to be honest, right? Mike Rhodes and Penn State men's basketball will not win an NCAA championship. They never will. And you can look at it one way as, you know, being too pessimistic. Yes, the things are falling into place. He just needs time. Okay, Mike Rhodes could spend the next 10 to 15 years here. I know that Penn State will not get a national championship when it comes to basketball. They just won't. Now, UConn, and Dan Hurley made this very apparent. The resources that UConn is not afraid to put into the basketball program, because football, again, is an afterthought for them. So they focus 110% and more on Huskies basketball, and look at the output. So I'm not saying that one or the other has to be a trade-off, that Penn State can no longer be a football school to get a basketball national championship, nor would I ever advocate for that. I'd want a football national championship above all else before a men's basketball. Do I think Mike Rhodes is doing everything possible in his power? Yes, he's made Penn State men's basketball more fun, more entertaining. He's gotten the students involved. That's important. It starts with the students, and the students seemed very involved in just one season under Mike Rhodes. They shattered expectations, right? Oh, they're going to finish second to last or last. The basketball experts had Penn State men's basketball at the bottom of the Big Ten. They finished middle of the pack. They were respectable. And had they made some changes on the roster in this first season, they probably would have been they probably would have been in a better spot to make the NCAA tournament. Now, according to sites like 24/7, in the early top 25 for next season, Penn State's right there, 25th. So Mike Rhodes has them in the right direction. They need to get back to a spot where they're consistently in it to make the NCAA tournament. But if you're expecting a national championship to come to Happy Valley, let alone back-to-back like that, you know, something that very few schools and programs have ever done. The other one was Florida back in 05, 06, 07, right in that area, in that neighborhood. They're not going to do what UConn's doing. Dan Hurley has created a machine over at UConn, but I would like to see Penn State men's basketball get to a point where they can contend in the Big Ten. They can be a respectable program that, yeah, you're projected to make the tournament. Maybe you can sneak into the Sweet 16. I'd be content with that. I think that's good, and it's better than anything that, outside of, the run with, Joe Crispin, Crispin brothers and everything that they did in the early 2000s, upsets along the way to get to the Sweet 16. That is the bar. Can you get past that? It's going to be difficult. I don't see consistent Sweet 16 berths either, but if you can be around the NCAA tournament bubble, I think that is content enough for Penn State. But they're certainly not going to bring an NCAA championship here home for men's basketball. That's just the fact of the matter. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoy these conversations, hit that subscribe button, like this episode, share it with friends and family, and let me know down in the comments what you think about Beau Bartlett coming back. Carter Starocci, Greg Kerkvliet have decisions left still to be made. And if you want to share some thoughts on Penn State recruiting and men's basketball and what their outlook is. Once again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today, now available on YouTube and also on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app.